So for this lab, we're going to use a different kind of format in ArcMap. We're going to use a data type that's called a raster data type. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the lecture. So I set up a folder for my data called GIS Lab 9, and in that folder I copied the elevation folder from the R drive, or you can download it and unzip it from Moodle. And when I open that, I see an MXD, and I see my data folder. And in the data folder I have shape files of water, I have roads, the urban growth boundary, a bunch of feature classes, and then I have two other folders. One is the Eugene DEM, which stands for Digital Elevation Model, and another one is a slope raster that I derived earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and launch my elevation, and I have had just crazy issues with ArcMap today. I've had to reboot a bunch of times, so we're going to hope this works. Great. So there's my digital elevation model, and it shows the elevation in feet from 335 feet up to 2,336 feet. And my low elevation is dark, my high elevation is light. And so what I want to do first is save this so I don't corrupt the first folder. So I'm going to save as. I'm going to make sure that I am back in the correct folder. And I would just go ahead and put my name on that. Yeah, I had trouble with this. So this is one of my goofs. You should be able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and say so bizarre. I'm just going to call it try to do number. Oh, you know what? Let me take this out and see if this works. Whatever. That is so bizarre. Okay, so there's my copy, and that's the copy that I'm using. So my original data is perfectly fine. The other thing I want to make sure is that my map document properties are set to restore relative pathways. Okay, so now I have that. I'm going to have you add some data layers so that you can get an idea of what the area looks like. And I think one of the things we could add is detailed water, and we could also add the urban growth boundary. And if I want to center on the urban growth boundary, I can right click that and zoom to that layer. The other thing I want to do is probably make that hollow so that I can see the digital elevation around that. Okay, so there's my digital elevation, there's my urban growth boundary, and I'm also going to give my water kind of a nice color. Okay, so there I've got that. And I'm going to save. Another feature of ArcGIS is called Arc Catalog, and I want you to add that catalog right now so that you can have an idea of your data structure. So I'm going to go up to Windows, Catalog, and sometimes it'll come in docked and sometimes not. So if I hover, hold the mouse down and hover there, I can add my catalog. And this is a way that I can keep track of my data as well as looking at the table of contents. So I'm going to expand my folder. So that's the MXD that I'm using. You can see that it is bold. There's my data folder. There's my polygon shape file, a line shape file, a point shape file, and what you see are these little, that looks like meat tenderizers if you're old enough to know a meat tenderizer, and those are raster data files. So I've got my catalog open, and I think, yeah, I can leave that docked like that. Okay. So we're going to go into Arc Toolbox and derive a couple rasters based on this digital elevation model. So if I look at my attributes in my digital elevation model, I can see that I have a value and a count. the value is the elevation, and the count is how many grid cells actually have that elevation value. If I were to look at the slope, what you see is, I don't remember if this was percent slope or degree slope, but anyway, if I right click the attribute, you can see that that's grayed out. In a raster data set that has decimals or as a float, you can't actually view the attribute table. So I'm going to close that down, and that's not really important now, just so that you know why that isn't showing up. So I'm going to add my DEM. So I'm going to go up to the Customize window and make sure that my extensions for the different tools are enabled. And I want you to make sure that Spatial Analyst is turned on. I'm going to close that. And then I'm going to open up the toolboxes, and there's a couple ways to do that. In Arc Catalog, you can open up the System Tools, or you can open up the toolbox from here. And I'm going to open up the Spatial Analyst toolbox, and then I'm going to open up the Surface Tools. And under my Surface Tools, I can see I can create an aspect, contours with Barrett. There's a bunch of stuff I can do. And what I want to do first is create a hillshade. So I'm going to open up the hillshade tool by double clicking that. And the input raster is my DEM, my digital elevation model. So I'm going to use my drop down menu. If this were not in my table of contents, I could still access it by just using the folder connection and say go into my data folder and use that DEM. And then one of the things you really need to be careful of is that ArcGIS, unless you set your environments, which we'll do later, defaults to the default geodatabase. And if you're in class doing this, the default geodatabase is on the C drive, and when you go home, you won't have your data. So you need to make sure that you point to the location of your data. And mine is here and there. And I want to put my new hillshade inside, so it's looking in the data folder. And I'm going to call it hillshade and choose save. And then if you expand your help menu, it will tell you what these other inputs are. So the azimuth is the angle of the sun, the altitude is the height above the surface, and I leave those at the default. The Z factor is if you're working in different units. If your elevation is in meters but your horizontal is in feet, you may need to change that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and leave this at the defaults. Choose OK. My hillshade is running. And I also had trouble with this morning and had to reboot. Great, a bunch of times, so it worked. So my hillshade gives me the impression of elevation, and it does that by creating different color values. So the hillshade no longer is an elevation number, it's actually just a color that gives that shading. So in order to symbolize a DEM properly, you need to drag the DEM above the hillshade. And to drag it, you have to be in your list by drawing order. So now I'm going to go into properties. I want to set the transparency at 50. And then I'm going to change the symbology. We want this to be continuous, so we're going to leave it at stretched. And if I right click here, I can get rid of the graphic view, and I can choose a word list instead of so I'm going to try I don't like elevation 2. I'm going to go to, where did elevation 1 go? I'll try that one. Okay, that looks better. And I also have the ability to change some of that. So let's say I want, how did I do that? I right clicked here and went into properties. So let's say I don't really want it to grade down to that green. I could choose a little lighter yellow. So you can mess with it and make it as discrete as you want. and I'm going to choose OK and OK. And so there is my symbolized digital elevation over my hillshade. So now I want you to create some contours. So you're going to go back into the Spatial Analyst tools, double click the contour, and your input raster is the DEM. That's the one that actually has absolute elevation data. Again, it's trying to go to my default. This time I'm not outputting a raster, I'm actually creating another shapefile or feature class. So I'm going to call it contour, and you may need to choose shapefile, but in this case it's going to default. So I'm going to say OK, and I want my contour interval to be, I think I put down 100 feet. You can play around with this and see which would work better for you. 100 may not show enough difference. The base layer kind of sets your starting point, and so we're going to play with that too. I'm going to put 300. I'm going to leave the Z factor, which is kind of the same thing that we were doing unit conversions, and I'm going to went to the right folder, and I'm going to choose OK. So actually my contour, let me show you what happened here. I don't know what happened, but I created that contour. Nothing showed up on my map. So I turned everything off. I zoomed to the layer. I don't see anything. I looked at the attribute table and it created nothing. It created the empty shapefile with no contours. This is what I was getting earlier with my hillshade. So I've got to probably uninstall ArcMap and reinstall it, but this will work for you in class. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And I'm going to turn these guys back on. Let me just have everything not work right now. Zoom to layer, there we are. Okay, so that's kind of that problem solving. One thing, when things aren't working the way you think, look at that attribute table and see if there's actually anything there. So anyway, you'll have created your contours, you'll create the DEM and symbolize that, and then I want you to add the data points that you collected the other day. And if you didn't collect any, then you can add the school file. But if I want to add data, I may need to make a connection to my Lab 8 folder. So I'm going to click that Make a Connection. I'm still on my desktop, so I'm going to say OK. Open up the desktop. There is my Lab 8 folder, and that's how I would connect to that data. And it's in a different projection, so I'm going to let ArcMap reproject that on the fly so it'll line up. And it looks great. One of the things that if you choose List by Source, you'll be able to see that my schools are coming from my Lab 8 folder, and my elevation, the other data, is coming from my Lab 9 folder. So this is a really great way to make sure you know where things are coming from when you work in ArcGIS. Oh, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to. So let's just say I want that in my Lab 9 folder. Okay, so there's a way to do that, which creates a copy. And I'm going to right click this feature that's in Lab 8, and I'm going to say export that data. And now I'm going to tell the computer where I want to put the data. So I'm going to go back to desktop, in Lab 9, in Lab Elevation, or in Elevation folder, in the data folder, and this is a shapefile. So I'm going to choose shapefile, and I already actually have a copy of that in there. So let's just call that Lab 2 or Eugene Springfield 2 and save it. And what you'll see is there's my new copy that's in my Lab 9 folder. There's my old copy that was from my Lab 8 folder. So I can remove that. So that's a way, it's a nice way to transfer data. And if I look over here, I can see that that has been added. So I'm actually going to remove that, and I'm deleting that so you won't have that confusion in your file. Okay, and I'm going to add the school folder back in here. Okay, so then I want you to evaluate the elevation data. So what I would do here is I would zoom in to one of the schools, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off the hill or the oh, I don't care, I'll leave the hill shade on. I'm going to choose the ID tool, and this is such a silly tool, but this is the way that works. I'm going to click on that school, and there's my tool data menu, and what happens is it's getting the data from the Eugene Springfield UGB, and I don't want it to take the data from there. I want to find out information from the school, right? So now I've clicked that spot. I have to go back here and click this again. Okay, so that school elevation is 469 feet. It is, oh my gosh, how cute is that? It's us, Lane Community College. I had no idea. I just picked it at random. And the meter elevation is 143 meters. Okay, so how do I know what the DEM is? So now I'm going to click the DEM, and I'm going to click right beside there. And it says that the value for the DEM is 466. That's pretty close. So I have the school at 400, and school data says 469. The DEM says 466. So I'm 3 feet off. That's pretty decent. So I want you to go through that process of evaluating different either the points you collected or this school data, and then I want you to make some kind of map for me. So let's go back out to zoom to that layer, and that's a lot of schools, but I don't know, they're not that bad. I could zoom in, let's just say I want to zoom in to those schools. I might want to make those a little smaller. So I want you really just to play around with some symbology, with making a nice looking map. Oh, I don't know what will work with this color scheme, but we'll play with that for right now. Oh, it's horrible, but not that horrible. Okay, so there's my schools. I'm going to add some road data because I think roads are awesome, but there it is. So you can drop your roads on the map, you can drag them to the table of contents, you can add them through the add tool, and that is horribly horrible. So I'm going to go here, never use solid black, and add some roads to that. And then I'm going to go into my layout view. I'm going to pick a title, pick a scale bar, north arrow, all that good stuff. And I forgot to tell you, save often. Okay, so when you're done, you're going to export your map as a PDF. Maybe. And again, I'm going to go back to, nope, I'm in my desktop. Lab 9, inside the elevation folder. Do not put it in your data folder. That gets really crazy. So there you go, save. If I look in here, I'm going to be able to get a screenshot of my data folder, my PDF, my 2 MXDs. And when I open this and get a screenshot of this, I'm going to see that the derived data that I created plus my contours. Okay, this is a really fun lab. I hope you enjoy it.